Unfortunately, what we've seen in recent years has been a very big retrogression when it comes to civil liberties and freedoms within China. It's become much, much harder for local journalists, for rights groups, lawyers, non-governmental organizations to operate, and it will become harder still with pending legislation that's just about to be introduced. What we saw was after President Xi Jinping came to power in 2012, there was a document named Document Number 9, which spelled out the unmentionable 7 things that were not allowed to be discussed in universities. And these included concepts like civil liberties, free speech, and discussing the Communist Party's historical mistakes. So all of those areas suddenly became no-go areas. So we've really seen a very big few steps backwards when it comes to free speech and civil liberties in China. It's become much harder for journalists, both foreign journalists based in China and local journalists, to practice journalism. What we've seen has been a lot of intimidation of journalists and of their sources as well. And we've really seen intimidation of foreign journalists on a scale that we haven't seen before. We see people interviewing people and seeing their sources detained, put in prison. We hear about journalists being assaulted, being threatened, sometimes even at gunpoint, being called into the Public Security Bureau, warned not to touch certain subjects. But we're also seeing that censorship being exported. In the most recent survey, 22% of foreign journalists based in China, that's a fifth, said that they had pressure placed on their bosses by Chinese diplomats overseas who'd gone to their news organization's headquarters and had called for differences in coverage or certain subjects not to be touched. And the situation is even worse for Chinese journalists. There's also a great deal of intimidation of Chinese news assistants who play a very important role in reporting for foreign reporters in China as well. So unfortunately, the environment has got a lot worse for journalists in China overall. I was there from 2003 to 2013, and during that time the environment changed quite a lot. In the run-up to the Olympics it actually got better, and then after the Olympics had passed it worsened. But we didn't really see the kind of intimidation that we see today. You know, for example, when I was reporting on my book, I did this experiment where I took a picture of Tank Man, so the very iconic picture taken on June the 5th, the day after the Tiananmen crackdown, of a young man standing in front of a line of tanks. I took that to 4 university campuses and I asked 100 young Chinese students to see if they could identify the picture. And what really surprised me was that 85 of them, 85 students, 85% couldn't identify the picture. They had no idea what it was. But then last year, some French broadcaster tried to repeat the same experiment, and they were standing on a Beijing street. They had a picture of Tank Man. Within 10 minutes, they were detained. They were interrogated for 6 hours. They were told that their visas could be at risk if they were to do such thing again. And they were told, you know, this is a sensitive topic, you shouldn't be reporting on it. So there's this real effort to dictate news coverage even to foreign journalists. And that's something new, and that's something very worrying. I think this is a trend which is just emerging, but one that we have to be very wary of. We're seeing sovereign countries bowing to Chinese dictates. For example, at the end of May, Malaysia turned back 2 Hong Kong prominent figures, a student activist and a politician, who'd been going there to talk at various rallies to remember June the 4th. And Malaysia did not allow them to enter the country. The police chief turned them back at the border. He said that this could jeopardize ties with China. And we're also seeing that with Western corporations as well, as especially technology companies. We're seeing this move where Western companies are prioritizing their ties with China, access to the Chinese market over freedom of speech. Last year, for example, LinkedIn began censoring posts about Tiananmen Square from China and Hong Kong, and they made a very explicit link. The spokesman for LinkedIn said that the move was necessary to create value for customers. So I think this is something that we all need to be very wary of, and we need to watch very closely, because freedom of speech is not something that can be measured in degrees.